So today's video is going to be a little bit more different than the usual videos I put up if you are subscribed to my channel. This video is going to be a bit more of a formal video, a bit more of a sit down, let's talk. I have something I want to get out to the public, something I am very passionate about and I feel needs to be addressed and talked about a lot more than it is. So the topic that I want to discuss today is called dysphoric milk ejection reflex, or other known as DMer. This topic is not talked about as much as it should be. I have a 5-month-old son. I have 2 other children, and in my whole, as long as I have been pregnant and had children, I've never ever heard of this. I have never been told this by any healthcare professionals apart from one, which I'll get into. So, you know, my midwife, doctors, nurses, no one at the hospital, no one at my doctor's practice told me about this. No one gave me any information. This word was never on anything I read. I read books, I was given DVDs. You know, as a mum, you do your research on things, and this has never been mentioned to me, ever. And the few people that I have mentioned to this now to have never heard of it either. So, before I get into what it is, my personal story on this, this is something that has really affected me. So my personal story is, I have 3 boys and I have never been successful in breastfeeding. My 2 older boys, the first one I gave up at 2 weeks because I was just like, this is too hard, I don't like it, I'm not doing it. The second one I fed for 6 weeks and had nothing but pain and ended up giving up. So my 3rd baby, I really wanted to do it. And I'm happy to say at 5 months I'm still doing it, but that's a whole nother story. So at 30 weeks pregnant, I started developing this feeling of extreme homesickness it's the only way I can describe this. I would just be sitting there and all of a sudden I would just have this really fleeting feeling. Like, it was really quick, gone within 5-6 seconds, you know, but I'd just be sitting there and I would just have this feeling come over me, that I was just extremely homesick. Like, I just so badly didn't want to be where I was and I wanted to be home, but you know, it's a horrible feeling because you're sitting at home, but I almost felt like, no, I want to be at my mum's, or I just this horrible feeling, and I put it down to hormones, as you would at 30 weeks pregnant. At this time my milk was coming in, like my colostrum was coming in. Throughout the pregnancy, throughout those last 10 weeks, this continued, and I would get it several times a day, and especially like in the shower, if I noticed that I had colostrum or something, and I kind of expressed it just a little bit, as you do, I think, I don't know, but within a few seconds afterwards, I would get this feeling, and I would be up at my mum's and get this feeling, which really disheartened to me because I was like, you know, I'm at my mum's, my mum is here, and I'm still feeling this way. It was just a feeling that you couldn't beat, and it was just not nice. So leading up to the birth, as this feeling was getting worse and more, I started thinking, you know, I just want my baby out. That was one of the major reasons I was getting impatient and wanted my baby out, because I was over these hormones, I was over how it was making me feel. It was kind of getting in the way of, you know, day-to-day life, and I was like, if I feel like this now, please say that I'm going to feel better after my baby's born. I was really worried, and I was telling my husband I'm scared that I will develop postnatal depression, and I was just really worried, and I wanted my baby out, and I wanted these feelings gone. So when I gave birth to him, the feeling continued. Now, the only time I would get this feeling, however, was when I was breastfeeding. So as I breastfed, if I breastfed for about half an hour, I would get this feeling up to 3 times. You know, so if I breastfed for an hour, he was kind of always feeding. So if you can imagine, I would feed him for like 40 minutes every hour to 2 hours, like he was constantly feeding. So I was constantly having, by the end of the day, I had this horrible feeling just over and over and over. Now, I had other issues feeding. I had constant mastitis, constant thrush, constant, which we have now found out was a staph infection, and I am on top of it finally at 5 months. These constant illnesses and being sick and all that kind of thing, and you get no sleep when you've got a newborn, and you know, I was so disheartened that my feeding wasn't happening this time. I was having so much trouble. I was getting these feelings when I would feed him, and I just started thinking, you know what, I felt guilty. But at the same time, I just knew that this was only to do with feeding, and I was like, why am I having these feelings when I'm feeding him? Why do I keep getting this feeling that I want to die? And that's no exaggeration. When you get this feeling, it is, you would rather be dead in that moment. Like I said, it's only 5-6 seconds and it goes away completely. But in that moment, you're like, I would rather not be here. There is nothing worse than being here right now. I just wanted to die, and it was getting worse. Like every time I got it, it was just a more stronger feeling, and it's not nice. So you do start thinking, you know, I'm developing postnatal depression. When you're feeding your baby, that's the closest you are to your baby. That's the biggest bond that you're getting at that. And I kind of felt like when my baby's this close and I'm feeding him and I'm having these feelings, like very confusing, very upsetting. And with everything else going on, I was like, I'm developing depression, and I felt guilty. I would sit there though and actually really ponder this and discuss it with my mum and discuss it with my husband, because I'm like, I have this feeling at no other time. Obviously, I was down and feeling quite upset over other things, being a new mum. But this feeling, I was like, I don't have it any other time. I love my child. I can hold him and not feel it. I can, I was getting really confused about it. I was like, why is feeding him making me feel this way? Like, do I really not want to feed him? I was struggling with the fact that I had all these other issues and I really did not want to give up feeding. I was proud of myself that I was chugging on through feeding, and it was getting to the point that I was like, I'm going to have to give up feeding though if I mentally want to feel okay. I discussed this with a lot of people. I discussed this with my midwife, who in New Zealand you only see till 6 weeks, and she was saying, you've just had a baby, let yourself rest, get your hormones in check. So then I was seeing Plunkett, and I was seeing doctors, and I would mention it to them, and they started saying things about, are you getting enough sleep? Are you eating enough? Are you, do you think you need to see a counsellor? Would you like to try some medications? And at the time I was thinking, that's the track that I'm going to have to take. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing embarrassing about that, and this is what's going to have to happen. Of course, I had those guilt feelings though, like, why me? Why am I feeling like this? I so badly wanted this child. And I think I was making myself feel like this all the time now, because doctors were telling me that this is what was going on. So I kept putting it off though. I was like, I'm going to get there, it's going to be fine. All the while, these feelings were actually getting worse. So at about 3.5 months to 4 months, I developed yet again another bout of mastitis, and I rang the doctor to see my doctor, and she wasn't there, and I saw another doctor that I'd never seen before. So I went in and talked to her, and she said, is there anything else going on? I see on your files you've had these feelings. Are you feeling okay? And I said to her, this is what they are. What do you think? Like, have you heard anything? And she said, yeah. She goes, I get a few girls come in that say this, and they, she goes, you're not on your own about this, and yeah, it could be a form of depression, but it could also be this. So she wrote it down for me. She said, go home, Google it, have a look, research it, have a look, and see what you think, and if, take those steps, see if that helps you, and if not, if you feel like this is you, then, that's good. If you feel like this isn't you and you really need some help, then come back. So I went home and Googled this, and like I said earlier, it is called dysphoric milk ejection reflex, or D-Mer, and I Googled it. So what I did is I put that in to Google, and it came up with an actual website that is d/mer.org, so d/mer.org, and it came up with this website here, if you want to look it up yourself. And the moment I started reading this was instant relief. I have never been so excited to read something in my life. I was messaging my mum saying, look at this, and she read through it and she said, oh yeah, there you go. I couldn't wait for my husband to get home from work to tell him. I was just so excited. So what this is I'll read it out for you guys. But dysphoric milk ejection reflex is a condition affecting lactating women that is characterized by an abrupt dysphoria or negative emotions that occur just before milk release and continuing no more than a few minutes. So the top things that you need to realize with this is not a psychological response to breastfeeding. When I read that, I was like, oh my goodness, I don't need to feel guilty that I'm getting this. Like, it's nothing, it's mentally, it's nothing wrong. You're not hating breastfeeding, you're not feeling guilty about anything. It's nothing to do with how you feel about breastfeeding. It is not postpartum depression or a postpartum mood disorder. It is not a breastfeeding aversion that can happen to some mothers when nursing while pregnant or when nursing other toddlers. So what it is this feeling that you get, they call it the dysphoria or the negative emotion that you get. It's a feeling that a mother gets suddenly before letdown and leaves within 30 seconds to 2 minutes. So what was happening, and when I read this and then paid close attention to my body when I was feeding him, I knew I would get this horrible feeling, and then I would just sit there, and by the time it had cleared, my son would almost start choking sometimes or pull off, and sometimes I'd have a lot of milk and I'm like, yeah, I'm getting this feeling right before my milk comes down. So the more I read, the more I was just like, oh my goodness. So you get this right before you feel the letdown sensation in your breasts. Often by the end of the first letdown, it is gone, and that's what I was saying. By the time he was choking on the milk, or by the time I felt that, I got that tingly feeling through your breast, or you feel your milk just coming down, I felt fine again. I felt happy. The feeling was totally gone. And then, later on in the feed, if it was such a long feed and I was getting let down again, that feeling would come on, and I knew that, oh, I'm letting down again, It's also a feeling that I can be in town or just anywhere and I get the feeling, and I just have this overwhelming sensation come over me, and then I feel the letdown. And I was really surprised that I had not noticed this beforehand. But I guess I didn't. I was so caught up in thinking that I had depression and that I actually needed some help. It's like a reflex. It is controlled by the hormones and cannot be controlled by the mother. She cannot talk herself out of it, which you can't. There is nothing you can do. You cannot put your child on the breast. I'll put my son on the breast and think this is going to be okay, this is going to be okay, and then this feeling just comes on. I can't talk myself out of it. What is actually causing this though is the dopamine chemical in your brain. So when you have milk release, when your milk is about to release, you have a drop in dopamine, and usually it will drop and rise back up quite quick. Now some people's brains can't handle that, and it just behaves in a way that it shouldn't, to be honest, and it's a mood drop. So when you're having a bad day, and your mood just drops suddenly and that kind of thing, that's a dopamine, that's the dopamine. So when your dopamine drops and rises back up, that's fine. But some people, for some reason, can't handle that. And so what is happening, because it's such a sharp drop and rises again, you have that real sharp mood thing. And that's why it's not just feeling down, it's a real, like, you just want to die in that moment. It drops so low and back up. It's, it drops so low that you just want to die, but it shoots back up so quickly. So that's what this is. That it's not common, and most mothers will not have this, but some mothers just, their dopamine levels just can't handle it. So if what got me when I read this, and this is why I instantly knew that this was what was wrong with me, is the experience of DMer is variable, and a mother will have either despondency DMer, anxiety, or agitation. So you'll get really angry, or you'll just get real irritated, you'll get very anxious, all different kind of feelings. Her dysphoria will fall on its own place on the emotional spectrum, ranging from a homesickness feeling to anger. And as soon as I read that, I was like, got it. Like, that is what, for months, I had told my mum, I have this incredible homesick feeling. It is the worst homesick feeling in the world, almost to the point that I felt like my mum had passed away and I missed her. I'd never see her again. It was that horrible, horrible feeling. Now, if you guys want to read more, if you think this is something that you are dealing with, like I said, the doctor and the few websites that I have found, like I said, this is not actually out there as much as it should be. But if you really want to know about this, like I said, it's www.d/mer.org. I'll actually leave a link below. Go and check that out and do some reading if you think this is something that you are struggling with. There's so many links on this page. I'm not going to read it all out for you guys, but this is something that I just had to read the first homepage and I was like, this is me all over. This is something I wanted to get out there. This is something that is extremely important. This is something that when I found out what this was, the instant relief, when I sit down to feed my baby, even though I get this feeling, you can't stop that feeling, but I know that I know ill feeling towards my baby and that I am actually enjoying breastfeeding and that it will pass. And this isn't something that I need to be medicated for. This isn't something that I need counseling for. However, some people do get this to a breaking point, which I have read and which my doctor did say to me. You know, some people really cannot handle this, and therefore there is things you can do, and you can talk to your doctor about that. But just remember, this isn't a mental thing. This isn't you. This isn't depression. This isn't anything like this. This is a very, very quick dip in your dopamine levels. Everybody will get this when they let down. Just few people's brains can't handle that chemical dip, and that is what is happening. There is nothing to feel bad about. There is nothing to feel guilty about. It is what it is. So this video is going on and on, I know, but I wanted to share my experience. I wanted to share how I felt, and I wanted to share what I have learned, and I want to put this education out there. I am going to put this video on my Facebook page. Please share it. Now, I'm not saying share this for the views or anything. You don't have to subscribe. You don't have to watch any more of my videos. That's fine. I want this shared because I had so much trouble finding information about this. I came across one video on YouTube, and I wanted to know more. I wanted to hear from people that had dealt with this. I wanted to know that this was okay. So I'm putting this video out there, so then if any other new mums or anyone types this in, this will come up, and they can feel like they can have that relief like I did, to know that everything is okay and you're doing well. Anyway, guys, like I said, please share this video, get this information out there. If you're a new mum, I would love for you to know that it's okay if you're experiencing this. If you know a new mum, share this to her, or at least share the information. Tell her to be aware that this could happen, and if this happens, it's fine. You know, I just want the information out there. This needs to be talked about a whole lot more than it is. It took me 4 months of feeling horrible before I found out that this was okay, and this does happen. So, alright guys, I have rambled enough, and I hope that you guys learned something from this video. You can take something away from this video. If you are interested in seeing more about my life with my 3 little boys, do go and subscribe. Otherwise, just remember to share this video and this information. Alright guys, bye.